Welcome back to another episode of Excuse My Grandma. It's Kim and my co-host,
Grandma Gail.
So this week, I'm super excited because we are joined by Nick Viall.
Oh, Kimmy, you're going to be in love.
He was on The Bachelorette twice. He was on Bachelor in Paradise, and then he became The Bachelor in 2016. And since then, he analyzes The Bachelor on his podcast, talks about dating. His podcast is called The Viall Files. And he is also an upcoming author, so we talked to him all about his book. And
I can't wait to hear what he has to say, because this has become a whole part of your life. And I want to know his take on this whole Bachelor world.
Okay, you guys, we are joined by Nick Viall. He is a staple in Bachelor Nation, and he also has his podcast, The Viall Files. He's an upcoming author with his new book set to release October 4th. Don't text your ex happy birthday and other advice on love, sex, and dating. Grandma, when you heard that title, you loved it.
I did. I loved it. It's right, because the texting is one thing that is my pet peeve with all the younger generation. Nobody uses the phone. I guess nobody's phone works, but they don't seem to use it. They text the life out of everybody, and it's just so ridiculous. But anyway, we'll get into that.
We'll get into all of that with Nick.
I agree. Can I call you Grandma?
Yeah, you can call me. Everyone call.
Okay.
I have strangers now calling me Grandma, so join the club.
Right. I agree. Yeah. I mean, people, well, specifically with your ex and their birthday, but in general, I think society has lost the form of communication through the convenience of text, but it's very hard to interpret people's mood or intentions. I always say you don't read text. People don't read your text in the manner in which you sent it. They read it in the feelings that they are in.
That they received it, right.
So if they're feeling defensive, they'll read it defensively, et cetera, et cetera. So it's definitely a not as effective way of communicating, for sure.
Yeah. Although my favorite part about my birthday is getting those texts from my ex. It's so nostalgic.
Well, you've got a whole list of them. You've got an entire page. So
you like it? Okay.
You could spend the whole afternoon thinking about each one individually. All right, let's get on to Nick's conversation. I'm sick of your exes.
Okay, I want to start with your age, where you're from and currently living, and your current relationship status.
I'm in a relationship. I'm 41, and I live in Los Angeles, California.
Amazing. So let's start with your time on the Bachelor franchise. I'm going to preface this by saying I love Bachelor. I actually wrote my college thesis on it, very into it. Grandma Gail
is very anti-reality shows. I wouldn't only say The Bachelor, but they're high on it, Bachelor and Bachelorette. I find...
No offense taken. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have my own feeling about, especially for I actually think it's degrading for the women, and I even think it's degrading for the men. So, but I'm a different generation.
Well, Nick, what do you say to people who think that way?
I have no problem with it. I mean, to be honest, I got on the show because my best friend's wife was watching the show, and I was making fun of her for watching it, and I was making fun of the people on the show. And as a joke, she signed me up. So I can't. I never really watched. I was not a big consumer of reality TV before I went on The Bachelor,
and now you're Mr. Bachelor.
Yeah, and then with the podcast, one of the shows that we have is to recap the show, and when that's not on, we obviously, my audience very much likes reality TV, so I kind of just fell into it, but. I understand and appreciate the people who it's not for, because it definitely can be degrading, and reality TV is all about getting people to try to be their most authentic self on camera, and sometimes our most authentic selves are best left in private. And so it's fun to watch, but it's not necessarily something that is best for our mental health.
For yourselves, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
on some level, you obviously enjoyed it since you did it.
Well, it's
multiple
also a
times.
living. He's made a living out of it, and he's been very successful in his own area. So it's like, do we love a lot of the things we do? I don't think some
Well,
of the.
he might. I don't know.
Well, I don't know, but I think you do it because you're good at it, and you've accomplished something, and you're taking a different take by writing now and being on a podcast. But it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, my experience, I mean, like, going on The Bachelor is a little different than going on other shows just because of the premise of the show. And, the first time I went on, I just kind of went on because I was like, oh, I'll get to go to Europe, and I thought
Right.
I thought it'd be kind of a fun experience. And then the other times kind of had its own specific reason. And it wasn't really just because I was like, at the time, it wasn't like a goal of mine to make a career out of it. It was, after the first time, it was just kind of, the best way I can put it is, I was just kind of very open to following opportunities that came my way, and I was at a point in my life where I felt I was in a position to take some risks, and mix it up a little bit and see what I could do with making some risks, and it all seemed to work out in the end.
I'm just curious, what are the percentages, or do you have any idea how many people actually end up with the spouse or the person that they've done on these bachelorettes and bachelors? Is there a statistic on that? I mean, I know a couple of them get married, but I mean, are they mostly for fun and then afterwards they go on like you did to something else, or do they really stay together?
I mean, I don't have the statistics, but there's been a hand.
I'm sure somebody has it. Some kid that's watching this program.
Yeah, there's definitely people who have those numbers, but I don't think that the statistics are any worse than, life. Yeah, like most people, and especially nowadays, relationships are tough and it's hard to work out. So there's been children born. There's only been. I think the first divorce was recent.
Oh.
For a while, everyone who got married stayed married. But I think there's been, one comes to mind. I think there might have been one other one. But once they get married, it's a pretty high success rate. But when they get engaged after 3 to 9 weeks.
It's a pretty fast relationship.
Although you did, probably.
Well, I did, but in those days we didn't have sex, so that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
In the 50s, you weren't sleeping around
No
on
fantasy
television.
My parents got engaged in like.
Yeah, I mean that's what we did. I mean, that was the next step that you did. You didn't make a year out of maybe then I'll move in and then maybe I'll go to the next step. I mean, you just do it. And maybe I have to say, in all fairness to Nick and to the people who are younger today, 50% of my friends got divorced.
Right.
So, it wasn't any different then than now because, sometimes your lives just change and you mature in a different way and it doesn't work out. But we didn't wait for years and years to call it an engagement or a marriage.
Or even a relationship.
Or a
nowadays.
relationship.
No,
Oh, my God.
People will wait 5 years. We're like, oh, I don't know yet.
Yeah. Still getting to know each other. Don't know what I want.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about this season of The Bachelorette. First time with 2 bachelorettes, Gabby and Rachel. What are your general thoughts about the whole 2 bachelorette thing? Because
it's different, so I like different, especially for a show that.
It's getting stale.
Well, I mean, their recipe for success has obviously worked for 20 some seasons, so I get why they stick to their blueprint, so to speak. But yes, I think it's nice to have them mix it up. I do think as far as so far, I mean, it's very early on. I don't know what you think, but I feel like it's been a little slow so far.
Yeah.
It's like you can tell they don't know what the F they're doing, and they're just they have all these guys, and you could see like Rachel and Gabby also being like confused. It's just like, who am I supposed to like? I don't want to step on her toes. The guys are like, I don't know who to like. I don't want to look like a fuck boy. And so I think as a result, it's just like, let's go. Let's get this
Get
let's
show
get
on
the
the
show
road.
going. Yeah.
Totally.
So it's been dragging its feet, I think, a little bit, but hopefully things pick up. But
I feel like always episode 1 and 2 is a little slow because like no one's really made connections yet, so you're not invested. My more thing is like with the messaging behind it. Like I know they're trying to be best friends, finding love together, female empowerment, yada yada yada. But I'm like they're competing over the same guys. They're being compared. Like they're losing me a little bit on the female empowerment train of like trying to stay woke in 2022.
Well, I don't think
Yeah.
they're coming from the same education. Their audience isn't exactly graduating with honors like you did.
That's so not true. That's so
I'm
not true.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would have to disagree with you on that one,
All
Grandma.
right,
I think
okay.
the audience of Bachelor Nation, I think, well, it's very diverse. Like it's it's a staple, and so you have conservative people, you have liberal people, you have older people, you have younger people, you have educated people, you have not,
That's interesting. Okay.
it's a pretty diverse
So
diverse
it's not
audience.
mostly young
there's
people
some
that they seem to attract.
No, I mean they have young people, but there's I think their core audience is between like the ages of like 18 and 45. The show's never been woke, and to be honest, I don't think they have a desire really to be all that woke. I do think they reluctantly have become more progressive, and then there's this debate, is it their job as a reality TV show to talk about, the social issues of today, or is it because they've been around and they're kind of a cultural staple, and people have debated that, and I think the show has reluctantly dragged its feet. I mean, obviously, when it comes to diversity, it was much needed, and they should have done a better job with that. But some of the other stuff, I think they kind of are reluctant about it. But to your point, I think it kind of gets in the way for them of the show, because you're right, like women empowerment. Like I think what they don't want is to be obvious that they're pitting these women against each other, because they don't want the backlash. But I think in their bones, they know that like the drama comes from that type of stuff, that kind of subtleness of, one of the guys being like, well, just, I'm here for her and I hope that's okay. And then all of a sudden they'll ask, Rachel, well, how does that make you feel? Like, do you want to die inside?
Yeah.
Like, do you want to quit? Like, do you want to cry about it? It's stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of roll my eyes at them, pushing the we're best friends. It's like, okay, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't know. But like, let's just get to the meat of the show.
Totally. I agree with that completely. And I feel like maybe it's just a show that works really well for like when it has worked. And then when it tries to like evolve, even if it's a baby step, it just doesn't work. I guess we won't know that yet until like we see this season kind of play out. One drama that happened, I guess, in this past week was the whole Chris saying that thinking about the fantasy suites, even though that's so far ahead, which Grandma is like when you spend the night with someone with no camera. So usually it's when you sleep with the person.
I mean, it's when you have alone
right,
off-camera
like,
time, and sometimes for some of the relationships, like there's a hookup, and I would say less than half the time there's intimacy. I think most of the time they're just talking, because like, a lot of times the lead has pretty much made a decision, and they're like, I'm not sleeping with everybody, like, but we can go hang out in this place. So and sometimes they do, it's a mix of different things.
Okay, let's move on because I feel like Grandma's out bachelored. Your podcast launched in 2019, the Viall Files. You very much, I've listened for a while, like cut through the BS, and I feel like my grandma is the same when you're giving relationship advice. When did you kind of feel like people started to resonate with that style?
Well, before I even started the show, I always was the friend who was fairly blunt with advice, but like I went through my own relationship struggles and heartbreak in my 20s, and I was a big mess for much of it, and to get myself out of that, I kind of had to see relationships in the world a little bit differently. And so that allowed me to still have empathy, for my friends who were struggling. I could come from a place of like, listen, I truly understand how you feel. I get it. Like, I've been there, but you really need to stop, kind of thing. And let me explain X, Y, or Z. And so, yeah, I was always kind of the friend that you would go to when you were tired of other friends, just feeding you bullshit, about like, and this, you're just kind of getting nowhere. And so people responded to it. And yeah, I just always kind of had a knack for that. So I knew when I started my show, that I wanted to try to instill that segment in the show and see how people responded. And thankfully they responded positively to it. And, yeah, it's been really rewarding. I mean, ultimately I'm just a podcast host and I'm just trying to have an entertaining show, but it does feel
Help
good
people through situations.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, actually yesterday I got someone wrote into the show and like wrote a really incredibly beautiful letter about like how listening to my show has like changed their view on things. And I gotta be honest, I got a little choked up. It was very nice. So that's kind of the cherry on top, but it is a lot of fun to make the show. And like I said, like I come from a place of like, I wasted, for me, a lot of my own energy and time on people who quite frankly didn't deserve it, or they weren't even asking for it. I just was giving them my energy. It was just like, because I didn't like the outcome. And so my stubbornness and my ego kind of got in the way of me seeing the truth of any situation. And that's ultimately what I try to do when people like call in, is just kind of be like, yeah, but that's not what's really going on. And so let me just tell you what's really going on, and then you can tell me what you think. And so my hope is to try to make things a little bit easier for people, because again, while I didn't always want to hear it back in the day, I often wish that I had someone, and sometimes honestly it was my grandma Phyllis, who really would shoot me straight sometimes, and I really appreciate it. I give her credit for teaching me perspective on life. And so
I think the older generation generally wants to help it, their grandchildren and their children, but it's hard to accept it because you're really in it yourself at the time. You sometimes don't see the forest for the trees.
100%.
So
yeah.
it takes a life experience.
Totally.
And we all have to go through it. I just think this generation is going through it too long. And hopefully now you're in a relationship, I think.
Yeah.
Good. And that you won't have these same issues, because you do what I try to say to Kim is you should learn from each mistake. If you can do that, then you're all right. If you just keep blindly going and doing the same thing again, that's where the problem really comes in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's tough though too. It's like even I find myself tough. Like, I give advice in here, but when you're in it, you really have to like have that self-awareness to like take that pause and be like, all right, what would I say to someone else who wasn't emotionally invested in this situation? Because like once it's much easier to give advice when you don't give a shit about the outcome.
Correct.
But yeah, so I totally agree with you, but I definitely tried to learn from each mistake and then try to like incorporate it in my new relationship. Like how could I make it's just, I'm just trying to always communicate a little bit more effectively in my life, like what's a better way to communicate this? Like, or just, maybe ask more questions or things like that.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of your current relationship, you've been with Natalie for like 2 years.
Yeah.
And so how did you guys meet?
She slid into my DMs. Yeah.
Modern love.
Yeah. Modern love. There we go.
And so, but you guys you weren't official right away, right? Like she had to kind of ask you or not ask you, tell you a few times like what she wanted.
Yeah. Well, when we first met, she was living in Georgia. I was living in LA. And so, that was definitely a bit of an obstacle. And, yeah, I at first, and I had been single for a while. So I definitely I had some reluctance about the possibilities. I wanted, also like there's coming on from the show, she's a surgical technologist, and I love that she, has her own thing, and someone in my position, it's like being from a reality TV space and having some notoriety. It's like, what's the like I sometimes had questions of when I would date people who were on other reality TV shows or actors or in the public eye, there was a element of them relating to my experience that was nice. But at the same time, I also enjoyed just talking to people who were kind of out of that bullshit too. But like that had its challenges too, because sometimes I would go on a date with like a teacher, and like they had watched the show, and like they would like pretend not to care, but like it would sometimes just get a little weird. And so with Natalie, that was never the case, but I definitely had some reluctance, and it just took some time for me to come around. But to her credit, she was very steadfast in what she wanted, and that gave me confidence in the relationship, because she was so confident in herself about what she wanted.
Well, she loves you.
Yeah, so
she loves you. So good.
So that was great.
Yep.
What advice, though, would you give to women who are like, oh, he's being reluctant, should I stick around or not?
Well, it's it's not a black and white answer, right? Because sometimes you have to feel it out. And I just say you just always have to be mindful of your energy, right? And you have to be mindful of, how does this relationship make me feel, right? Because when you, like for mine and Natalie's situation, right? For like 9 months, we weren't official. We were still dating other people. It was a very casual relationship. But as time evolved, feelings grew, right? But early on, we were very honest and open that we enjoyed our company. We hung out, and when we weren't hanging out, like it was okay. We were meeting other people, but as things grew, it got to the point where, Natalie kept communicating, like, my feelings are growing, and it's becoming harder and harder to not being in a relationship with you. And so she was just always very mindful of how much energy she put into the relationship with me, because it reached a point where it became more frustrating than enjoyable, or more confusing than clear. And so
she had to see if you're on the same page.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of times, whether it's a man or a woman in these kind of situationships, they'll reach that point where they can no longer they're no longer more happy than sad or things like that, and then they start ignoring those feelings, and then they keep not getting the answer they want, and then instead of really enjoying their company, they're just constantly confused and constantly sad. So you really got to be mindful of how the person you're pursuing is making you feel. Because it's, at first you're like, oh, I like them, and they're nice, and they're fun, or maybe we have good sex, or whatever it is. But at some point, when you stop getting less than what you want or deserve, you're feeling empty inside, and you feel less than, and then that relationship is no longer making you happy. And I think you have to be aware of that and recognize that. And then once that's the reality of the situation, you have to be, you got to stand your ground and be honest and set an expectation, and be willing to walk away and hope that they stop you.
See, the whole thing is timing. I've always said this to Kim. Timing in life, you have to both be on the same page. Because after a certain point, if one really isn't feeling it, there's no point in the other person pursuing it. I mean, and just exactly what you were saying. I mean, eventually either you get on in step with the other person, with your partner, or you have to call it a day. It could be very sad and upsetting, but that's just the way of the world today.
100%. Yeah, you got to get someone who wants to choose you and be willing to like sacrifice everyone else, because that's the thing. It was the world's everyone's just, I mean, everyone. Can I swear around your grandma? I kind of
sure.
The world everyone's a fuckboy now. Right. You're familiar with the term
Yes,
fuckboy?
I've heard that now a lot.
But even women, right?
Well, absolutely. I think women are worse than men,
because it's just like, now when people date, everyone kind of knows they have access to the world, through dating apps and through social media. You kind of know that like the next best thing could be around the corner,
Yeah, but you got to stop thinking that.
Exactly. So people start dating, and then they're just like, well, I like them. I mean, I like them. I mean,
right.
They're cool, but like, what if? But are they? And so people are comparing who they're dating to like the world, the field. And so everyone's just very reluctant to like decide to commit or just invest in any one person, because everyone's just worried that like the greatest thing of all time is around the corner.
Well, that was one of my objections to what I see on television, because I think that's fueling the desire amongst men and amongst women of perfection. And I don't think any relationship really has that. You can be happy and you can complement one another, but perfection is only in the stars. It really
I'm starting to like kind of change my tune though, because I used to say the same thing as you, Nick, of like we're comparing it to like our ideal man who may or may not exist, or woman. But then I'm also like, when you do really like someone, you do say like, oh, I'm not going to like continue to date other people, or I'm going to stop swiping for a little bit. So I feel like when the connection is strong enough, like if you're saying, do I like them? Do I not? Is there someone better? You probably just don't.
Well, or you're insecure about yourself. I'm not so sure it's about the person that you're going out with. Sometimes it's your own insecurities.
I mean, don't get me wrong. You're right, Kim. I have a lot of people who are calling into the show being like, I like this person, and I what's going on. I just think as a society, the people in the dating pool right now have become increasingly more reluctant to really invest in any one person. It's just like because that, clearly not everyone's doing that, right? But I think and then like, no one's the villain in their own story, right? So everyone else is the fuckboy, but when we're doing it, we're just picky. We're just like, I'm just holding out. I just think, as a whole, I think to Grandma's point, I think if you like someone, you see some good qualities, it's okay to just say, I'm going to invest in this situation. I'm going to invest in this person. I don't know if I'm going to marry him. I don't know, but I'm going to give it the old
shot.
College try.
Correct.
And we can break up. That's okay. I know breaking up's not fun. I know it's not easy, but like there's a lot of people who have one foot in and one foot out. And it's women and men both doing it to one another, and that is it's getting a lot of people very discouraged and frustrated with the overall landscape of the dating scene. Like, and certainly not everyone, but just I think the more and more people are doing that, and that's creating more and more fuckboys
and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is actually similar to a point I was going to bring up about your book, Don't Text Your Ex Happy Birthday. You talk about like 9 big concepts, and one of them is like meet your ego. I feel like we've touched on this a little bit, but I thought that was really interesting because at least in my own life, I'm like, why do we give fuckboys so many chances? It's not because, as you say, like they're manipulative narcissists who like, get one over on us. Like usually it is about kind of like looking within, right?
It's your own insecurity that allows you to keep giving them the upper hand. If you really were secure in your own feelings, you wouldn't give those fuckboys any conversation. It would be one night and goodbye. So a lot of it is yourself. You have to.
Grandma nailed it. Yeah, I mean it's that's the thing. It's we're chasing that validation. It's. Well, like, if you got cheated on, or because if I can get the fuckboy to pick me, then I'm special. And it's, to Grandma's point, it's knowing that you deserve better, and knowing that you're already special, and knowing that if someone is going to not be willing to make you a priority, invest in you, that they don't deserve you, rather than feeling like you need to change their mind so that you feel deserved.
Mm-hmm.
So right on the money.
I feel like I've also kind of heard you say, like, even if you're meeting their friends and they're texting you good morning and good night and you're taking a trip with them, like, they're still not your boyfriend unless you actually have that conversation.
Well, I don't agree with that. Why, if you're going on a trip with somebody at this point, unless he's a friend, I mean, there has to be a distinction.
Back in the day, Grandma, like that would be true, but nowadays there's this, because of these increase in fuckboys and these situationships and all these people having one foot out the door and one foot in, you have these kind of, again, situationships, and ultimately what it is, these people are hanging out and they are doing what people refer to as these boyfriend and girlfriend types of things, and so it's a common frustration I'll get from people calling in. It's just like, well, they're acting like my boyfriend, or they're acting like my girlfriend, and I'm just confused. And so I guess what I'll say to them is, Well, acting like your boyfriend is to say, I want to be your boyfriend. I want to make you a priority. Because like meeting grandma, while nice and personal, like you can introduce your platonic friends to grandma and you can have dinner with anyone.
We've gone to dinner with like a date of mine before. It was like a third date of mine. That doesn't mean he's my boyfriend.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know.
That's all right, but that's fine.
That in itself is not
Right.
doing boyfriend things. You know, boyfriend things are making a commitment, and boyfriend things is saying, I want you to expect me to not,
Yeah,
you know, I
100%.
want expectations of me. And we have to, and I think that's, we have to start doing because and again, that's where that ego comes in too. It's just like, well, I'm not crazy because he had dinner with me, you know, and it's like, no, you're not crazy, but like he's still not
Committed.
you know.
He's not committed.
Yeah.
Is there a time? Do you ever? I mean, now you're in a relationship, and is there ever a moment that you say, "Now listen, I'm together. We have to go the next step. I want to be. Well, I don't even know if marriage is even involved anymore, but I want to move in together, or I want. Should people put a timeline on that? In other words, we know people who live together for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden, it's over. You know, so. You know, for me, it would be, you know what? In 6 months, if you don't know this guy is your guy, move on, or this woman.
I think timelines are tricky.
Okay.
But I do think, I mean,
It's also
what I mean by
ages.
timeline,
A 26-year-old doesn't have the same timeline as a 40-year-old.
sure. So that's what I'm saying. Like timelines can vary, but I think more importantly, back to what we talked about before, it just comes down to how, like, it's crazy, but very few people check in with their feelings while they're dating someone. Because what usually happens is you go on and you meet someone, and then after the first couple dates, you decide whether you like them or not. Well, I like her, I like him, you know, and then you just from that point on, I think most people stop checking in with how they feel. From once they decide they like someone, then they try to like convince the other person to like them more, or they try to plan for the future of this relationship, and or in a situationship. Then now they just like, I like them, I want to get them to commit to me, et cetera, et cetera. And so then they stop checking in with how does this person again make me feel? Like I've been hanging out for 3 months. We always have lunch. I've met their friends. We took one trip, but like I'm always confused by how they feel. There's no regularity when we're hanging out. And now when I actually think about how I feel, I'm constantly frustrated. I'm constantly sad. You know, and I think at that point, that's the deadline for you to say, I need to make a decision because I am no longer happy, you know, and I think very few people are doing that. I think what they're doing is they're setting these artificial timelines or these deadlines, or they're not checking in, or they're just like a victim to their ego who says to them, we have to get this person to say yes, because if you don't, you're a loser. And that never works out.
Yeah. Doesn't he give the best advice?
He is. He's so terrific.
Is he your new favorite Bachelor?
Yes.
Over Ben?
Ben is wonderful. You're more than welcome to still have
But
Ben
I
be
think,
your
but
favorite.
I think I'm along with Nick now.
Okay,
in
you
my
can have
thinking.
both. Two
I can
favorites.
have both. Exactly.
I mean, Kim kind of looks a little bit like Ben's wife.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
You guys could be sisters for sure.
Really? Oh, I love her.
There's definitely a resemblance.
Thank you. Okay, so normally you're recapping The Bachelor, but now you're launching a new venture where you're going to be recapping sports. That
Really?
is Fandemonium, which is on Amazon's new radio app, AMP. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I love sports, and I love talking about sports, and I'm a big Green Bay Packer fan. And unlike reality TV that I kind of like fell into and kind of reluctantly talked about because of the experiences I had, I've always been a huge sports fan, and it's just like, yeah,
It's a dream job. That's a dream job. Every guy's dream job.
Yeah, I'll call up my buddies and talk on the phone with them. So now I get to get paid for it and have it just be like, to Grandma's point, just a dream job, a passion project. So it's a lot of fun, and again, I spent a lot of time talking about like.
When has it started already?
It has started. It's every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, live, and yeah, we'll be on to later today. It's the dog days of sports. Only baseball's going on right now.
So how do you get it? You like download AMP?
Yeah, Amp's just a free app. It's like Clubhouse, if you're familiar with that.
Right.
So it's just a free app, just AMP. And yeah, there's my show, and there's a bunch of other shows that are in the AMP kind of portfolio, and it's very cool. And again, like it's live, so you can interact sometimes, and we'll bring guests on occasionally. And yeah, it's a ton of fun.
Do you want to do that one time?
Well, I can only do it in basketball because
Well, not
baseball,
sports. I mean,
baseball.
something-
I've signed off on because it's so slow. I find that by the end of the game, I've
Golf,
dozed
golf.
off. Oh, golf! You
Yeah.
want to talk about our golf?
Well,
or
I
I'd
didn't-
rather talk about.
I actually didn't want to talk about sports at all. I just meant like a separate show.
I was just
but-
going to say,
yeah.
Kimberly's not a sports fan, but she's good at golf, so you
Thank you.
could do that.
You are?
Yeah,
Sort
I'm
of.
terrible
she hits
at
a hell of a
golf.
long
Yeah.
ball.
Thank
Not sometimes on the right
Right.
hole, but that's another story.
Right. So I want to end the episode with a game we play with all of our guests, Grandma Gail's old-fashioned dating quiz.
So where he's going to land.
So we'll go through some hypotheticals and then deem whether you're more of a traditional dater or more of a modern dater. Okay. Would you rather get a call or a text from the person you're dating if it's just to say hi?
Just to say hi. A call. Yeah.
Would you sleep with someone on the first date?
I mean, I have.
So then yes. Dating apps or setups?
Dating apps. Setups they're a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Well, I always say that too, and she disagrees
That's
with me.
interesting.
Like, I just feel like, yeah.
I always think if you know somebody that's recommended somebody, you're sort of 50% better off, but maybe not.
I've never trusted my women friends to set me up with people.
I don't
and guy
trust
friends
anyone.
That they're used.
but myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. I don't. Setups are tough, and it's never worked out for me.
Although, Nick, I feel like I would trust you if you have any friends for me to set me up with.
Well, that's fair, and I appreciate that. I
Thank you.
don't.
Okay.
And
Good,
it's-
Nick. Good.
And it's because they're either married or not worth your time.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
Fair. Also curious, when you and Natalie go out with other couples, is it mostly, because I know there's an age gap, like people, like your friends or her friends or kind
Or
of,
their friends. Maybe they've developed a group of friends just on their own.
Both. A lot of my friends are in couple situations, so we'll like double date, and she's got a great group of friends, and I hang out with them as well.
Has she moved to
again-
L.A.?
Yeah, we live together. Yeah, and so on the very first time I met Natalie was in New York, and so I was kind of nervous just because we didn't really know each other, and I'm just kind of alone in New York with this girl I don't really know anything about, and so I have these friends who live in New York who they're the friends that I would go to for advice sometimes. They're
Good people.
They're good people. They're around my age. Well, I mean, she's a little younger. He's older than me. They're a fantastic couple. And so I brought Natalie along, and the four of us hung out because I was just kind of
Nervous.
I just kind of wanted like not to be alone at first with this stranger.
Yeah.
But also,
she
I
strike
kinda
you as
wanted
like
to
a serial killer vibe, or?
Well, I just didn't really know much about her. In fact, once I met her, I was like, oh, it'll be fine. But I also kind of was curious of how Natalie would interact, and she really shined, obviously, and she can really hold her own. And, it's like so. It's great to. We love to double date with a variety of people, and we love to go out, and we balance each other quite well. And she's the youngest of 7, and I'm the second oldest of 11. And so that, according to my therapist, is
It's a good blend.
Right.
it's a good blend. Yeah.
Okay, back to the game. Move in together before getting engaged or after?
Well, Natalie and I live together. We're not engaged. It's funny because we live together, but in terms of like dating, I think people are moving in way too much too early because
We've heard that from other people too
Yeah.
that have been on the show.
there are two there are two reasons to move in with someone. I think one you're engaged or married or you've made this commitment. Great. Or 2, you're both mutually excited to move in. And mutually excited is the key word, because what's usually happening now is someone's lease is up. You've been, there's some artificial timeline, and then someone's like, I think we should move in. And then someone's like, kind of like maybe reluctant. And then the other person's like, well, what does that mean about our relationship? And it's just all this like unnecessary pressure. And then one person's convincing the other person and making a pros and cons list. And I think that's never good. If you're both excited about it and you want to spend time, then great, go for it. But I think too many people are applying unnecessary stress and pressure on a relationship because like a lease is up, or they want to take the next step and they think that's the next step to take, and that's not always the case.
I like that rule. Okay, who should pay for the date? Should it be one person in a couple, or should you like split or alternate?
I think the guy should at least the first date. I appreciate as a guy the
reach.
The
I call it the reach.
Like,
yeah.
Like just like I hate the assumption that it's my job to pay, but I still want to pay. So just pretend that like you're willing to pay.
Kimmy's very good at that. Yeah. Show him the reach, Kim.
Yeah.
No, it's more just like, do you want me to? Oh, thank you so much.
You slowly grab your purse, and so I can be like, I got it. That's all I need.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think I think that's. Yeah, I like
mostly
that.
modern.
Mostly modern date. The last one was a
Yeah, the call was. I'm assuming the call was traditional.
Yes, the call
yes.
and the paying for the date.
And the paying for the date.
Yeah.
You're modern. and you don't have to call. You were thinking about it. You might have wanted the text in reality, but you were being nice to me.
I hate texting. Like if you want to talk to me, if we have something to talk about, let's call. And like a casual hi, sure, but
you have something to say.
Yeah, like I definitely prefer the call. I the texting, any discussion whatsoever over a text, I can't do.
Yeah, but if you've gone out with the guy like once or twice and he's calling me, I would be weirded out.
Why? I still don't get that. But all right, let's not bring that up. That's your problem. The guy wants to make a phone call.
I'm not like ready.
I have a buddy who he's a little bit younger than me, and one of Natalie's friends he thinks is cute, and he's a really nice guy, but I don't like see it. But we all went out once, and then like he randomly FaceTimed her out of the blue the other day, and Natalie's friend was like, what is going on? And like she like answered. But like they just like out of nowhere, and I was like, "That's ballsy."
That's
to just,
nice.
like,
No, that's so strange.
Yeah, I agree with Grandma. It's a shame.
It's
like,
a shame that you
like,
can't do it. Everyone's gotten themselves so nervous about a phone call or about FaceTiming that the poor people on the other end just say, "Oh, the heck with it. I'll just text him, keep it neutral."
Yeah. I mean, I'm old enough that I used to like call a girl up nervously, not knowing what the answer would be, but like, would you like to go out with me? And like that just doesn't exist anymore, and it's kind of a shame.
Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Tell our listeners how they can follow you.
And I can't wait to read your book, Nick.
I can't wait for you to read it. Let me know what you think. You can follow me at Instagram or TikTok at Nick Viall, and listen to my podcast, The Viall Files, anywhere you listen to a podcast. If you like watching podcasts, we're on YouTube as well. And that's about it.
Hope you guys liked the episode with Nick Viall. It was a lot of fun to actually meet him. And please follow us on Instagram, Excuse My Grandma, or on TikTok if you don't already. Share our podcast with your friends. Leave us a review.